Hello, guys, and welcome to another Roundtable here at BrotherlyGame.com. I'm Sean Sullivan, assistant editor for the site, and after two games, the Union have qualified for the knockout stages. Today, I'm joined by two contributors here for Brotherly Game, as well as a special guest, Chase Sr. So, let's just go ahead and get started. Let's do introduction, guys. So, Chase, let us know some stuff about you and how you got roped into this.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. Sean reached out to me yesterday asking if I would be part of this roundtable discussion. Sean and I went to Temple University together, as evidenced by his great Temple polo there. We did a lot of TV and digital work while we were there a few years ago. And right now, I'm currently working at WNEP TV in Scranton, Pennsylvania as a reporter, multimedia journalist, and podcast host. I cover everything from news to sports, amateur, professionally, college. My podcast right now, it's called The Chase Down, and I cover a variety of subject matters on that. It's mostly sports-oriented, but I also dive into some pop culture, music, cuisine, lifestyle, mental health, and some stuff like that, just some other interests, but it's mostly sports-oriented. And then I also have another podcast that I helped recently launch. It's called The Underrated Hour with Matt McGloin. He is a former Penn State NFL and XFL quarterback. That, of course, is a football-heavy podcast. So staying busy with everything that I'm doing, and happy to be a part of this roundtable discussion. Thanks to Sean, and haven't seen him in a while.
What's up? My name is Justin. I'm a contributor at Brotherly Game. Started off contributing, I guess, about a year ago. Pretty much do a lot of stats and data stuff. I'm currently a PhD student, so I deal a lot with data analytics already, and I just, sports data science is pretty interesting to me and a hobby. So that's kind of where I get my contributions from. It's my first roundtable, so pretty excited to talk about it.
What's up? I'm Chris Bratton. Started contributing to Brotherly Game as the Harrisburg City Islanders correspondent. Moved to the Penn FC correspondent, and then have been covering Union to Bethlehem Steel from time to time when I get the chance. Trying to contribute here from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, so covering things from Central PA. Kind of given that slightly different perspective from the people who are down in the Philly area. Just see soccer a little differently, but mostly I've been excited about the MLS is back. But other things about it have been, less well received so far. But I'm glad to be able to discuss that with some people, see what other people think.
Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, whatever you want to call it, game kicked off at 10:30. Union scored 5 minutes into the match. Everyone thought pretty awesome. Kind of kept with the day where it was goals galore for the other two games. Chris, did you expect the Union to get into the knockout stages this early within just two games?
I didn't think they were going to lock it up like this because I just remembered the Dallas game, where they just couldn't put anything together. And then the LA game was exciting, but still was just a draw. So, they had coming into this, there was a lot to be excited about that. But at the same time, they hadn't really proven anything yet. So I thought there was a chance they could have gone back to square one and didn't get any points. But they got the win over New York, and then they really, Inter Miami, as much as they have all this backing, kind of are showing that they're an expansion team. And so Union did what they needed to do against them. And so 2 games, they got it locked down. So it's like, put your mind to the World Cup, where like some of the big countries, they get those first 2 wins, then they get to relax, which hasn't really been the Union's MO, but that they did what they needed to do at this tournament, which is exciting.
Before it was still that group of 6, obviously before the tournament started, Group A had 6 teams in it. No one was kicked out. Did you see that, or once the groups got realigned, did you think maybe Union had a chance against Inter Miami to clinch basically a spot in knockout?
Yeah, so I think when it was first announced and it was group of 6, I think the format was pretty confusing, first of all, that why they would have one group of 6 and the rest, seemed that they could have easily arranged it so that the odds weren't going to be stacked against the group of 6 like they were initially. But I know whenever it came out, 538, along with a lot of other odds makers, had the Union's odds to make the round of 16 and further pretty high. So I was confident from that we would make the round of 16, and definitely once the realignment happened and going into this game, I thought that it'd be, a pretty big boost to the players if they were to be the first team to clinch or one of the first teams to clinch. In any sort of group formatting, if you can clinch within the first 2 games, gives you the third game to kind of prepare, tweak your game plan a little bit. And so that's a really big, I would say, motivation. So I was hopeful they would do it. I think the team is really good. So, I went into it thinking, expectations were high, I would say.
Chase, do you see the Union trying to take the game and try to win Monday, or just try to get more players involved, getting more players some time off the bench just to get their feet moving?
Yeah, so I want to answer that question and then piggyback off of your last question. Obviously, right now, we're in such unprecedented times, and we've never encountered a situation like this before in all sports, including the MLS, where these teams had 4 months off, and these seasons were either halted or they're being restarted. And I think because of that 4-month break, we're going to see a bunch of weird stuff. And I think we're going to see a lot of upsets. And this is all across the board. I'm talking MLS. I'm talking Major League Baseball. I'm talking NHL and NBA playoffs. I don't think necessarily the best teams are always going to win. This is a weird situation, and I think a lot of weird things are going to happen. And I think some of the teams that are the healthiest, some of the teams that were in areas where they were able to train more so than other teams that have their conditioning up, are going to be the ones who win some of these matches and some of these games and really rise to the occasion and go on a little bit of a run. And again, I think that's going to happen across all sports. We're just going to see weird things happen because we've never encountered a situation like this before. And a lot of the athletes either took the time off as a way to get better, work on their games, and keep their conditioning up, or others, which is totally understandable, might have taken the time off to just kind of take a step back, focus on their health, and really take the safe route if they felt as though this situation was dangerous. Answering the last question, Sean, I think that anytime you can win a match, win a game, you're going to try to do so. And I think that's especially important right now, given that I don't think that the players are in peak conditioning. So if you have an opportunity to kind of work on the lungs a little bit, work on the legs, and work some kinks out, you're going to take that opportunity. So I think the Union are going to try to use this match as a way to work out the kinks and just get rid of some of that fatigue and some of that lag that has built up over the last 4 months.
If I can comment also, I saw that if they win the group, then their first knockout round game would be at 8 p.m. versus if they came in second, their knockout round game would be at 10:30. So that's a little added bonus not to want to have the 10:30 p.m. game. So who knows if they're actually going to think about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would. But
For sure. I mean, that last night, like that start time was so weird. And I don't think anybody's conditioning when they're getting ready for the restart and the MLS's back tournament. I don't think they're getting ready for a 10:30 match. That was just weird. It wasn't organic at all.
Exactly. And everything that goes on, in terms of recovery after a match, you're pushing that extra, 1 to 3 hours of recovery. Then in the middle of the night, and people are either going to want to skip that because they're just exhausted, want to go to sleep, or do it. And then they're not going to bed until 3 a.m. And, your whole recovery from an intense soccer match is just pretty much screwed.
No doubt.
I needed to recover from that match, so I don't know
Yeah.
what it was like for them. I can't imagine.
Well, even along those lines, think about it. The Union's first game was at 9 a.m. last Thursday, right? Their next game, 10:30. So, even just that, trying to, I think, mentally prepare, you have this huge gap. And even with that, just the lineup itself in the tournament, you're in Florida, so you're dealing with all of the heat, the rain in the afternoon, in this bubble condition city, and we'll get to that. But I think the issue that you're looking at is how do you prepare?
Yeah,
I don't know. It would be. I think the 10:30 game would probably be a lot harder on most of the players, just because you have to sit there and be thinking about the game, for 12 hours before you actually get to play, and your pre-game prep doesn't start until 7:30 or 8 at night versus the 9 a.m. game. Yeah, you have to get up really early, probably 4:35 to have your pre-match meal kind of thing, but at least your work for the day is done at 11:30 essentially, kind of thing. So
I think also you're not really influenced by outside temptations. This is really, with the bubble going on and really all professional sports, it's all sports all the time, and it has like an AAU tournament type feel. If you're playing basketball growing up in an AAU tournament and you know that you got to play 3 games in one day, you're not going to do anything but play basketball, recover, or prepare for basketball. It's the same thing with the bubble as well. You're thinking, breathing soccer, and when you're not playing, you're not practicing, you're not preparing, like Justin said, you're working on recovery. So you're not really influenced by any outside temptations. You're just focused all on soccer. And I think that makes the weird start times and kind of the inorganic nature of this a little bit easier to prepare for and take.
Yeah, the only advantage now is that at least both teams are having to deal with it together, compared to when it's like, the Union fly out to Seattle or San Jose and they're used to it, and the Union are trying to, if their body feels like it's 1 a.m, at least now that when both East Coast teams are playing at midnight, it cancels out. There's no competitive advantage.
It's competitive advantage. You don't have fans, but they are somewhat like I heard it more in last night's broadcast of the pumping in the artificial crowd noise. I don't know if you guys picked it up. I didn't hear it as much in the first game, but you heard like some of the boos and some of the like cheering and all. Does that help? Like, just straight up, do you think that helps you as someone at home? Is that a competitive event? Like, because then on that note, who's choosing it?
Is there like a DJ with like a boo button and a cheer button and a chant button? Just like, or is it some? I mean, it's like FIFA technology, isn't it? That they're just like trying to make it like excited, not excited, shot, save. But it doesn't do anything for me, because it kind of just makes me check out, because you can just tell that it's artificial.
I wanted to check in on this, so I did some listening and researching as to how the networks are going to do a lot of this. For instance, in Major League Baseball, if the Mets are playing in Philadelphia at Citizens Bank Park, the Mets broadcasters are still going to broadcast the game for their network, but they're going to be doing it from their own ballpark. But the production crew at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia is going to handle the broadcast for that Mets crew. So when you watch these broadcasts, you're going to see more of a neutral feel, regardless of who the home team or the away team is. And they're going to kind of play it down the middle. So I think that's kind of what you see with the MLS a little bit. Like, honestly, Chris, I think there is somebody who is handling, like, it's like a DJ. It's like, oh, well, we got to play it down the middle. We can throw a boo in here. We can throw a cheer in here. It's going to mostly be almost like a neutral broadcast. But for the players, it's got to be really weird, right? Because they're on the pitch and they're scoring a goal and they hear fake cheers. They know that there's nobody there. I think it's more aesthetically for the fan and the viewer watching.
Yeah, I think I cover the Bundesliga as well, and I know with their broadcast they were pumping in the crowd noise, and I liked it on shots of the broadcast where it was really up close, just a person or two. You couldn't see that there was just playing in an empty stadium, and you got a little glimpse of that it was like normal. But when they have the full screen shot and there's clearly no fans in, and they're pumping in just the constant cheering of the home team, it kind of is like, well, we're living in a pandemic. There's no fans there. It's not, stop trying to fake reality, even though for the, people sitting at home, it's like, okay, kind of is like normal, but you don't want to forget the time that we're living in, kind of thing. And I think also with the crowd noise, it could be, I know this conversation happens much more with European soccer, where their brands are much more global, and whether or not they're catering towards the fans in their specific city who go to the games, or if they're catering towards the entire, their global fan base, with a lot of European soccer fans, they have their match going fans, and that's where a lot of their revenue comes from. And those people probably don't want any crowd noise and things like that. But you or I who sit here and, I have no experience of watching, or very little experience of watching European soccer live. So all I ever learn or know about is just on my couch. And so having the fan broadcast in is no different than normal. So that's catering towards, me as, a global fan, not necessarily catering towards the people who go every single week. And both fans are totally valid. It's just interesting to see which way, the clubs could go or the leagues could go.
ESPN touted it as, this is how we're going to be able to take chances and reinvent the broadcast. All you're seeing is a drone shot. That's different. And scaffolding.
What I'd be trying to do for a sport like soccer and the MLS that's really trying to pick up steam here in America, as compared to, the other major sports, I would do this with MLS and I would do it with baseball. I would just mic everybody up. The technology is there, and I think it would be really compelling and captivating to the viewer to kind of see these athletes and these coaches on more of a personal side, and to take away from the awkwardness of there not being any fans in the stands. That's why they pump in that fake crowd noise. It's all for the broadcast to make it less awkward, because an announcer can only get so excited. He can only increase his vocal range that much before it's just like, that's a little too much, or it just sounds weird because there's no roar after it. So to take away from that awkwardness, drone shots, different types of shots, different technology, but mic everybody up. And I know you're like, whoa, soccer players are running around all over the place and they don't have big uniforms. It's very light. Yeah, but like I said, you can have boom mics. You can have little lavalier mics that fit on these guys. I would do that with MLS and baseball. And it's a shame that we didn't use this as an opportunity to do more of those things, because I think this should be the ultimate kind of testing ground and experiment for networks to play around with new things, because who knows, we might not have another opportunity like this to do those things again.
You want the XFL style broadcast?
Yeah, a little bit more of that.
Yeah,
Why
right.
not? I can't hear the roar. I love the roar from the crowd. So give me some smack talk.
You wanted to know, like at the VAR, what they were actually talking about, because let's be honest, VAR is there, as we found out. We thought it was there. It was asleep apparently in the first half of that game. But like you saw with that penalty kick that was called back, VAR's there. It would have been interesting, I think, from Chase, your point, and Chris, let me know if you agree, to see what the conversation was, right?
Oh, yeah. I loved on the XFL games where they'd be reviewing a play and they'd go up, you hear the guy and they're just telling them, it's like, well, you did this, and according to the rule book, you can't do it. That would be great if you had the VAR guy, you got to hear that and see what they're saying. I feel like soccer, though, you couldn't just start doing that, because like the refs they're always so secretive, and I feel like the decisions are much more controversial, that they would probably fight that tooth and nail. But I think that would be something great. That's probably about the most interesting dialogue you get, because you do get some of the noise from the field. They're pulling some of that in, but it's just the same. You can almost make like a bingo card of like the things you hear. They're like, hey, away. They're just saying the same couple of things over. They're not like having conversations while they're playing down there. Or, I'd love to have them mic'd up, but I feel like it'd be TV MA for language. I think every single soccer match I've watched since soccer came back, regardless of the country, the announcer has had to apologize for the language they picked up. I think, like every single one, and not always in English, sometimes in Italian too.
I think
I would love
it would have been a good start.
Show it on HBO or something.
Yeah, for sure.
I think a good starting point would have been to mic up the managers. I think it's really interesting to hear what they're, how they're communicating with their players. You get a little bit of that because there's no crowd noise, and so you can kind of hear all the different things that they're saying. But I think that, for me would be fascinating, just to hear about their in-game, trying to get their in-game tactics on the fly adjusted, communicating that, so you can kind of get a sense, more of what's going through the managers' brain, during the game, how they're adjusting and kind of thing. I think that could be interesting as opposed to necessarily the players. I think there's a lot of just yelling, one word things kind of thing. So not necessarily as like cohesive as what a manager could potentially do.
If Zlatan was still in MLS, I would want him mic'd up.
Oh, there you
I would
go.
just want to hear what he says for 90 minutes.
So, as we've seen since the tournament started, FC Dallas showed up with positive players, vice versa, quarantined. And then Nashville came down with it, and both teams are out of the tournament. Your thoughts?
I think that initially the bubble city sounded like a decent idea. However, I think there's some critical protocols that they, did not implement, which would have made it a lot better. I think the lack of, for MLS specifically, the lack of the 2-week quarantine once they got there was, I think, ultimately is why FC Dallas and Nashville had to pull out versus the NBA, who have had similar, not necessarily as widespread of tests, but similar positive tests. And like Sacramento right now, they have 4 or 5 players that have tested positive. Some were positive and now are back practicing with their team again because they were in Florida for long enough that they were able to self-isolate, quarantine, and then recover enough to rejoin back with their team. I think not having a firm 2 weeks, you needed to get down to Florida and have a 2-week isolation before joining or before actually competing. I think that was a critical misstep that MLS had.
I think it has a better chance of working for MLS because you got a lot of like teenage kids, younger guys who it's like all you got to do is play soccer and then go back to your room and watch Netflix. They can handle that. I think they're probably more equipped for that. But at the same time, it's a house of cards because it's worked fine. All the protocols have worked so far outside of the teams that didn't get into the bubble, Dallas and Nashville, really. But as soon as just one thing happens, like a missed test or a missed positive, and it just like someone on one team has it, and then someone on the team they just played gets it. As soon as that happens, it's all over.
Yeah, I think we have to look at these sports leagues as businesses and these franchises as businesses because that's what they are. And if they don't play, they're not going to generate any type of revenue and the players aren't going to get paid. So they're going to take and look at every single scenario if that means that they can play and make a little bit of money. And for the players, I think a lot of them we've seen are willing to take that risk because if they don't play, they're not getting a paycheck. So they're willing to take that risk and compete. And then moving off of that, like, all of us, many of us at least, are dying to work. A lot of us are looking forward to getting back to work if we haven't been in our common workplace. Their jobs are to play sports, to play soccer, or to compete. And if they can't do that, I know for me, if I was out of work this entire time, it would drive me nuts. And I'm sure for a professional athlete who has a maniacal mindset, because that's what it takes to be a professional athlete, being outside the competition for so long has to just drive them nuts. Transitioning off of that, going off of everything that we found out and looked into about the virus, I think the bubble idea has been actually pretty smart. Now, you have to look at the situation and say, hey, we got to be all right with people getting the virus. It's inevitable. It's going to happen because we don't know where it is. And as many people have said, it's kind of like a silent enemy. It's going to pop up. People are going to get it. That's what's going to happen. But if we're able to sequester these teams inside a confined area, we limit a lot of risks and we limit a lot of spread. And we saw that for some of the teams that were outside of the bubble, Dallas, Nashville, the spread went rampant and they had to shut down their season. That's what we have to avoid in the NBA bubble, the MLS bubble. We just have to avoid the spread. If there's a guy or two or a handful of people who test positive, that's okay. But if it's an entire team that tests positive and then they pass that on to another team, that's when all of this could really, really go awry. But sequestering these teams inside a confined space and really just having them live there, I think is a smart idea in theory because, yeah, the coronavirus can be airborne if somebody is like coughing, but it's not like traveling through the air great distances, right? So if you get everybody in and they all test negative, then the chances of it just like popping up inside that bubble are very, very small. But Sean, you bring up a good point in saying like a lot of the workers going in and out, yeah, they're not having to follow the same protocols. They are being exposed to other areas outside of the bubble, and that could present some problems. But smart idea, I think.
That I think with talking about the bubble, there's another conversation I think we should have, not necessarily on whether or not they can have it all happen in the bubble, whether or not they should be happening in the bubble, and whether or not the resources that are needed to be allocated to providing all the, an insane amount of testing every single day for all of these players, whether or not that sap on the resources in Florida is having a negative impact on the community in Florida. And I'm not sure, I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't read anything on whether or not it is or not, or, because these players who are getting tested, they get the results the same day. And so odds are that same turnaround is not necessarily happening in the rest of the community. And so maybe, yes, all the players and all the, the sports are happening and it's being done well in the bubble, but kind of like at what cost is there being a greater spread in the community because there's a sap of resources because of that. So I think, like Chase said, sports or businesses, they had to get some sort of league system going, or else players wouldn't get paid. A lot of our teams would, have not had any money and could potentially close down. Who knows, what crazy circumstances could have happened. But I think there's, additional moral arguments to be had, whether, at what cost is sports returned. So I just that was my last thought on the bubble.
That at the end, this is all happening because MLS is a business. And that's why they're showing games at 9 a.m. and 10:30 p.m. It's not because they think, ooh, this is fun. It's because they have to give these networks a certain amount of content each year or they're out a lot of money. And so that's why I think we as fans who are, pretty low on the totem pole, as Justin pointed out, there's people's lives and careers that are getting impacted by this stuff. But as fans, I feel like I'm a pretty big MLS fan. I write about a team. I buy MLS gear. I, go to games and stuff. And I pay for a streaming service primarily to watch games, and I can't watch any on that streaming service for this big return to soccer tournament. I can't even follow it as I would want. I have to stay up late and watch games on Twitter on other channels that I wouldn't normally have to do. So I don't know who this tournament is ultimately for, other than the people who need to make money right now, because the fans are kind of not getting a lot out of it. The players aren't getting a lot out of it. The people who have to work to make this happen aren't getting a lot out of it. And so there is sort of like this era of contractual obligation that's undercutting everything and kind of taking away some of the fun. As much as fun as it is to see the Union win, I'd rather not than be awake at 1 a.m. or having to wake up at super early to see it happen. I'd feel better if maybe they had just waited, put the games on ESPN Plus that I could just watch them easily, let everything cool down. And if they had to say like, okay, this is not going to happen this year, that's it. Everyone would have been safe and they wouldn't have had to like do some of this stuff. But, as great as it is to have it back, have soccer back, I still feel kind of left out that it's so hard to try. Why is it easier for me to be watching games in Sweden than it is to be watching games in America? That's why I feel a little left out by the whole tournament format.
I think for any expansion team in any sport, it's really hard to get off the ground, especially for the Union. They're in a really competitive market when they were first founded in Philly, and it was hard for them to gain exposure. And I know that they haven't had boatloads of success, and at times they've been in the middle of the pack, but you go back, 6 years ago now, is really critical for them to really hit it with their number one pick when they selected Andre Blake. And to see him kind of grow and develop over the years, I think has been pretty neat. There was a lot of pressure on the Union to really nail down that selection. How many times have we seen number one picks in all sports just go wrong, turn into busts, and it's really crippling for a franchise. But now you look at Blake, and he leads the MLS tournament in saves so far. He's really helped carry them through the first 2 games. And when you have a steady goalkeeper, it just really helps with the foundation and future of that team, but especially in a weird situation like this, where I think down the stretch, as these games become more and more competitive, they're going to be a little bit more low scoring and defensive oriented. It's going to be really important to have a goalie who you can really trust and lean on. And it's been cool to see Blake develop into that guy.
Chris, Justin, Chase, thank you for this. Guys, it's been fun. It's been a wonderful evening. Hopefully we do this again. And everyone, thank you for watching the latest Roundtable.